Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Welcome to the channel and welcome to today's video about the Ginkosynthese MAGMA compressor module. This is a diode-based analog compressor that I actually built myself. It comes as a DIY kit if you are so inclined. You can watch at the end of the video how I built it. So if you bought the kit, you can follow along with me then. But first, let's have a look at the module itself and what it does, how it sounds, etc. So first thing, what is a compressor, right? A compressor is like an automatic VCA. Let's put it that way. So it's a voltage controlled amplifier. So it controls amplitude, controls volume. It's self-modulating in a sense that it has a built-in envelope follower. Now, usually the envelope follower captures the same sound that's being processed. So what's going to happen is you set it so that when a sound gets too loud, the compressor will lower it. But soft sounds won't be affected. And that's a way to squash down the dynamic range of a instrument or recording in order to kind of tame the dynamics, and it's usually used in studios for mixing or for mastering. But it can definitely be useful in a modular setting as well. So why don't we go over some of the controls here just to get a feel for what it has, what it offers. You have the audio input right here, which is normaled to the envelope input. On most compressors, this envelope input would be called a sidechain input, right? So you can just think, if you know about compressors, you can just think of that envelope input as a sidechain input. It's also an audio input, but this one goes straight into the envelope follower part. So that means that you can have a different signal controlling the volume change, right? And another signal is the one that's being affected, right? And we'll see why that's useful and interesting pretty soon. We're going to do some audio ducking, right? Which is that effect of the bass going a little bit soft each time the kick drum hits, just to make sure that they both fit in the mix. And that's what I'm going to illustrate with this patch here today. I have my MPC-1 set up here. There is a beat that I programmed already in here and a bass line. I'm using a CV program on the MPC-1 and 3 CV outputs over here, so I'm not even using MIDI. And this is my bass line, my bass sound, which is just a Hertz donut, and it's going through a VCA. Now, the sound of the MPC itself is going into my Analog RX2, right, which is just here to amplify the MPC, and it's doing two things. One is we're sending the stereo outputs from the RX2 right to my output mixer here, the ST Mix, and this is just going to the TX2 output module into my interface. So the MPC pretty much just going in there and then back out, right? But the RX2 has a mix output over here, so that's summing into mono, summing the stereo outputs of my MPC-1 into one mono output. This mono output, I'm sending it to the filter 8, right? And what I'm doing here is I'm cutting off all of the frequencies from my beat except for the very low ones. So that means that the kick is gonna go through and pretty much everything else won't. And then the output here, I'm taking the low pass 4 output of my filter 8. By the way, no resonance at all, and volume compensation is on just to make it punchy. And that is going into the sidechain or envelope input of the MAGMA. So basically we'll be controlling the volume of the bass, right? Because the bass is the Hertz donut going into this VCA and back into the input of the MAGMA, right? And the output of the MAGMA is going into another channel of my mixer right here. Right? So what we should hear is a volume variation on the bass based on the kick drum. So the MPC gets mixed to mono, filtered down to just the bass drum, sent to the envelope input of the MAGMA. The bass is the Hertz donut through a VCA going into the audio input of the MAGMA, and it gets affected. Now, what are the controls here on the MAGMA? You have a gain control, which is just a volume for the input. You have the recovery control, which is a volume for the output. So you can make up for the gain that is lost with the compression process, right? That's usually called makeup gain in most compressors. Here it's called recovery. We have the envelope attenuator knob. So this is just an attenuator for the envelope input, for our sidechain input. And there's the compressor control over here, the big knob. And this is the amount of compression. So I don't know exactly if it's the ratio or the threshold or a combination of both, but I think that this has a fixed threshold and the compress knob is actually the ratio of compression, right? You have an attack switch here. So you can switch between fast attack, which means the compressor will react immediately to any sound that goes above its threshold. That will cut off any attack, right? If you have a sound with a lot of attack, the compressor will already be acting during that fast attack. But if you set it to slow, then the compressor will take a little longer to come into play, so that actual attack or the transient of your sound goes through unaltered, and then the compressor starts acting. So that's a different sound, right? And you have a release control, a continuous control for the release. And the release is how fast the compressor will then back off once the sound has lowered below its threshold. And that's where you can set things to be more frantic, like changing a lot, pulsating a lot. If you set a fast release, or you can set a longer release and things will be a little more buttery, a little smoother, right? And you'll be pushing that sound behind the mix a little bit more permanently, right? It won't jump back so readily. And you have a very cool marble here with some LEDs behind it, and that's why it's called the MAGMA, because the LED, the gain reduction LED, lights up and interacts with the other red LED in there and looks kind of like molten lava. Am I missing anything? Of course, there's a CV input over here. What does the CV do? It even has its CV attenuator. Well, this is just a CV control for the compression control here. So it's like a automatic version of the big knob down here. Right, so right now we're not using that. We'll be using mostly manual controls to hear the different sounds. And we're going to start with this sidechain beat bass thing, and then we're going to check out some other things, like, for example, how does this compressor sound affecting the beat itself, right? I'll send a mono version of the beat to the compressor so we can hear what it does to the sound of just a drum beat. Then we'll also try it with my electric bass guitar, which is it's a classic device to use for bass guitars, the compressor. It'll smoothen out the sound. We can even use a little extra gain to add some grit, some drive, some saturation to the bass sound. So excited about that. So okay, without further ado, let's hear this beat. Right? So this is just the beat here, and it's coming straight from the input module to the output mixer. And this is the bass right here. Now if I turn the beat down, you can hear how the volume of the bass is fluctuating, right? And that fluctuation is based on the sound of the beat going through the filter. If I open the filter more, you get a different kind of reaction, because it will now be reacting to the snare drums and other things like that too. Right? I can make it more radical if I turn the compressor up. Make it louder by bringing recovery. I can make it more reactive too if I turn the release towards the left, so make it faster. So now you really hear that volume swell right after the kick drums. Let's turn the beat back on. When the beat's on, you don't really notice it, and that's the point here, you know. Basically, you're making the bass make room for the kick by bringing the volume down each time the kick hits. It is noticeable, actually, for me anyway. Make the attack slow, and that'll respect more of the bass transients. I kind of like it better. For this function, I like the attack fast. I have the envelope attenuator over here. If I turn that down, basically not compressing anymore, right? Because we're not sending anything to the detector circuit, aka envelope follower. And as I turn the envelope attenuator up, we start getting more of that gain reduction on the bass. Turn the release a little bit slower. Cool. Over here I can draw different modulation shapes for the Hertz donut. Cool, right? Let's do maybe another beat over here. We'll copy this one just to keep the programs consistent. Let's go to 42 here. Also be called MAGMA. Do it. And first we'll erase the bass. And then we'll erase the beat. Erase, do it. Let's program a beat. So now let's just have a quick listen to how this is sounding once it's made mono and filtered. Alright, so I'm just going to turn this off over here, and we're going to take this cable that's going into the detector, just plug it in here just so you can hear. So this is what I'm sending to the detector. So as you can see, that's basically just kick drum, right? All right, let's send that back in there. Okay. Now let's turn up the, now let's do a bass. We're not hearing bass because I haven't actually programmed the bass yet. Turn up the beat again. And now change my track to number 2, Hertz bass. Record. So I already hear the ducking, how the bass goes down in volume each time there's a kick hit. Now, if you're programming your beat in the modular, you don't need to do the filter trick. You can just send a multed output from your kick drum directly to the sidechain input of the MAGMA. You don't have to use the filter trick to isolate the kick drum. It's even better that way. But it's working pretty well right here. Let's add some interest to that bass line. Gonna add modulation. Weird, for some reason I can't. Alright. Can't be recording. Now we can do it. And so. Cool. Let's listen without the beat, but we're still sending the mono version, filtered mono version, to the envelope input. You still hear that compression happening. Make it more radical. Faster release, more compression. more envelope input. Cool. Feedback. You can do this with chords too. Doesn't have to be just the bass, you know. Very common in EDM music to do it with chord stabs and stuff. Basically everything. You can send the entire mix, but then you'd probably want two of these or a stereo version. Maybe there's a stereo version coming up soon. Anyway, but for bass or for any monophonic sound, this is amazing. Alright, now let's have a listen to what the beat sounds like through there, right? So now I'm going to stop the sequencer and we're going to take this mono output. Instead of sending it to the filter, we're going to send it directly to the compressor, and this time we won't send anything to the sidechain input because it's normaled to the audio input, so that if you plug it in like this, the detector will be reacting to the audio input itself, not to anything else. Okay, so let's listen to that. Cool. Look, I just upped the gain. Wow, listen to that. Pretty gritty. Let's make the release longer. The attack soft. Bring the gain back down a bit. There's a bypass switch here. As you can see, it's really taming those low notes. If it's taming it too much, you can always either reduce the compression here or bring down the envelope attenuator. Right? Bring down the recovery too. Right? See how that yellow LED behind the marble is lighting up? That's the gain reduction parameter. So now I made the release as fast as it goes, and we really hear how it kind of breathes. Volume goes up and down. Bring down the compression. This, by the way, is the Battle, also by Ginkosynthese. I'm sending it the Orbit 3 Chaos Oscillator as a noise source, right? And just playing around with some scratching. Right, back to my turb-tabling days. Cool, right? So let's bypass this. So this is what that beat's sounding like with no compression. Let's turn it down slightly over here. Let's try to gain match it. Actually, this is not it. This is the straight output. So we were doing a little bit of parallel compression here. That you can do as well. But yeah, this is the compressor right here. Let's bring it down. Now we'll turn on the compressor and make sure it's as loud as without it. A little louder. There you go. Turn this back up a little bit. So with compressor, that gain louder to get a little bit of that saturation. And that click too. That click right on the one on the hit. So nice. So compressor off. Quite a difference. Quite a difference. Makes it very hard. All right. Oh, the battle is so nice. This is an actual professional DJ crossfader over here, adapted for use in Eurorack. Super nice module. I don't think I'm making a video specifically for this module, but you will probably see it in a lot of stuff that I do. All right, so let's stop this and let's hear what a bass guitar sounds like. I'm gonna get my my trusty precision over here. Can't go wrong with one of these guys. All right, plugging it in. Maybe lower. Let's turn on the compressor. Envelope a little bit down. Release. A little longer release. Fast attack. Some recovery. And let's check it out. Definitely some distortion or saturation going on there, which can or not be desirable. Without it, super different, right? Now, if I turn the gain down, and the recovery up, we lose that saturation, but now we get this fatter sound here. Without the compressor. Compressor on. Super cool. So this can be part of the front end and instrument processing portion of the modular. For example, we can send this output instead of straight out, send it through a phaser first. Right, very cool. If I turn off the compressor. Still sounds good, but it loses a certain something, right? A certain, I don't know, chunkiness or punchiness. So yeah, this compressor is super nice. I think this could be something that people charge loads of money to have on their 500 series rack. And we have it available to DIY and stick in a Euro rack. So cool. But while we're at it, why not try it with guitar? My sketchy Gibson, it's not a Gibson at all, it's a chord. Let's skip the phaser for now, just hear the guitar with the compressor. Right, without the compressor. So yeah, it's a nice sounding guitar, but the compressor. Just super punchy, way punchier. Super nice. Way better than my little red MXR pedal. Sorry, MXR. And quiet too. So that. Surprisingly quiet actually, because usually compressors, as they're bringing up the lower volume sounds, they'll also bring up the noise floor. So it's to be expected that a compressor will add noise, right? But I don't feel like this one really does. Cool. What a tool for the tool set. And this is one I will not only use for synthesis. I'll actually use it in the studio. I bet it sounds good on vocals too. I'll be doing lots of experimentation with this thing. Alright, so let's have a look at how to build it.
Alright, so first thing to get out of the baggie is the printed manual. Very complete and detailed. Please do follow it closely. And yeah, you get a marble with the kit. Let's see where that goes. As well as the hardware and electronic components needed to complete the build. All the pots, jacks, spacers, washers, all of that stuff. Resistors, compressors, capacitors rather, diodes, LEDs, etc. This is the black backplate, which I suspect is for shielding, and this is the panel, super nice aluminum panel. And let's get started. Let's put that PCB on the helping hands and start measuring the resistor strips. I usually don't really trust my eyes interpreting the color codes on these tiny resistors, so I just measure them and start putting them where they go. So yeah, always start with the flat, low profile components such as resistors and diodes. Now we're going to cut off a bit of a diode lead in order to make a jumper for that 0 ohm resistor right over here. So yeah, basically just a little bridge. Okay, so now let's put the diodes in there. And once all of these flat components are on, I actually like to solder them from above, because these are plated through hole boards. The solder will go through to the other side anyway, And by doing it this way, you avoid leading with that forest of leads on the other side. And you can just solder them all in one go. And then all you have to do is turn the board around, trim all of the leads in one go, and then just observe and touch up anything that doesn't look perfect. Sometimes you get a little solder blob, like too much will go through or not enough, and that's why it's a good idea to touch it up. Now the next flattest components are the IC sockets. I'm going to use the back plate here to keep them in place as I turn the board around to solder them up. I usually solder the opposing corner pins first to keep the sockets steady, fastened, and then solder on the rest of the pins. Let's do that for all of the IC sockets. All right, looks good. All of the notches are matching the drawings on the PCB. That's important. Now let's move on to the ceramic capacitors. These are not polarized. Most of them are acting as bypass capacitors for the ICs. I made a little bridge there and had to remove the excess solder with soldering braid, desoldering braid. It's normal. All right, now these are the electrolytic capacitors now, and these are polarized to make sure to plug them in correctly. And as you can see, some go on the other side of the board, right there, while some others go on the main along with the other components. All right, trim up those leads, touch up the soldering. Now the transistors, make sure they match the drawing on the silk screen. Solder them up, trim the leads. And now the power header. Power header goes on the back side of the board. Make sure it's nice and flat. Line it up well. And that the notch is facing where it should, which is the outside of the module. Now we're going to plug in the potentiometers. You might as well snap on the ICs. Some of these come a little spread out from the factory, so you have to sort of squeeze them to get them to line up with the sockets. Snap. There we go. Be very careful to orient them correctly. Make sure the notches are facing where they should. Right, now the tall trimmers. 3 of those. Now the LEDs. These are polarized as well. Make sure they're oriented correctly. Now that little button in the bottom, that's the bypass button. And the switch, which is going to be the attack switch, fast and slow. I'll snap on those sockets, the jacks, and see, I'm putting the module on and I forgot about the marble. So yeah, just make sure you put the marble in there before the panel, or you won't be able to fit it later. Right now, with this build, there was another issue. One of the capacitors was too tall. As you can see, I'm still not able to fully fasten, and that's because of that capacitor right there. This was a beta kit, and Jan has assured me that the commercial kits, so whichever kit you have, will have a shorter capacitor, so you won't have to do this kludge I did of soldering the capacitor on the back. But yeah, it wasn't a big deal. I just soldered it on the back like that. There was even space for it. Now, good idea to also put in the spacer before fastening the panel. Right, that's another thing you won't be able to get to once the panel is on. So yeah, 2 spacers. Use the included hex nuts, and now it fits. You can go ahead and tighten up the nuts on the potentiometers and the jacks. Get these nice black banana nuts. Silver ones for the jacks. Now just push those LEDs through their holes and open up the legs to keep them in place. Also the button kind of falls out, so I'm putting something underneath it to keep it pushed up against the PCB, and that's the first thing I solder because it's kind of fragile, could fall off easily. And it looks like I'm making a little bit of a mess here with the solder. Might have to clean that up with some desoldering braid. There we go. Alright, so now just solder up all of the hardware components. When you're done with that, clip the LED leads. Cool. And that's it. Time to finish tightening the nuts with the included bifaco tool. And place the knobs. Big knob goes on the compression parameter, and the smaller ones on gain and recovery. Tall trimmers don't get them. And the back plate. Back plate gets the screws to fasten it with the spacers, and that's it. You have a beautiful compressor MAGMA built.
All right, so thanks for watching. I'm glad you made it all the way to the end of the video. And that's it. If you liked it, if you liked the channel, feel free to join our Patreon and like, subscribe, comment below, all of that stuff. And stay tuned for the next video coming up soon.